She didn't resist when they handcuffed her at the shooting range. No badge, no explanation needed. Just a quiet woman hitting impossible targets who refused to identify herself. The courtroom in the sleepy town braced for a routine bail hearing, until the back doors opened with weighty purpose. A four-star Navy admiral, fully decorated, strode wordlessly down the aisle. Veterans in attendance instinctively snapped to attention. The judge went pale as she unfolded the confidential file before her, and in that instant, the atmosphere shifted entirely. By the way, where in the world are you watching this video from? If this kind of story captures your attention, consider subscribing for more hidden accounts of service and quiet valor, the kind rarely told, about the heroes who never seek applause. Morning light stretched across an isolated civilian range on the northern edge of Oregon's coast, with low fog wrapping around the distant targets as the first marksman arrived. Among them, a woman around 36 years old, remarkable not for her appearance, but for how deliberately unremarkable she made herself. Worn cargo jeans, a loose charcoal jacket, and a plain navy ball cap pulled low. She moved alone to the furthest booth, wheeling a hard-shell case that might contain a telescope or studio gear. Levi Monroe, the range officer, peered from his observation hut, steaming coffee in hand. He'd spent nearly 2 decades in the Marines and another 10 managing this facility, long enough to profile shooters on site, weekend thrill-seekers with flashy gear, deer hunters adjusting scopes, police officers honing skill, and hardcore competition buffs. But this woman didn't fit any category. She took her place silently, methodically piecing together her rifle with the ease of muscle memory built over decades. Monroe noticed immediately her stance, her breathing, her finger discipline. Her first round hit dead center, then she began changing distance with no recalibration, no scope shift, just her breath, posture, and subtle shoulder adjustments. She read the shifting breeze like it was printed on glass, correcting for gusts no one else even registered. One shooter, visibly unsettled, leaned into Monroe's hut. "Sir, the woman down there, she's not just good, she's surgical. That's not civilian shooting. And no ID tag either." Within half an hour, 2 sheriff's deputies arrived, moving slowly, hands hovering by their belts. "Ma'am, we're going to need to see your identification and firearm permit," the senior deputy requested. She turned, posture relaxed, hands exposed. "Is something wrong, officers?" "Just routine. License and registration, please." Her expression didn't flicker. "I'm afraid I don't have those on me." A quick search turned up no wallet, no mobile device, just a blank key card and a notebook filled with alphanumeric strings that resembled coordinates. "Ma'am, we'll need you to come with us." Still, no resistance, no excuses, only silence and cooperation, which somehow rattled the deputies more than a confrontation would have. As she was guided toward the squad car, Monroe couldn't shake what he saw. Her gaze, always moving. She scanned the horizon, treetops, and distant cliffs like someone tracking a threat no one else could perceive. The Coastal Haven Sheriff's Department is modest in size. Just a few holding cells, a basic booking room, and cramped offices for the sheriff and a pair of detectives. The woman remains completely silent throughout intake, not resisting any procedure but refusing to answer even the simplest questions. "Your name?" asks the booking officer. No reply. "Current residence?" Still nothing. "You do realize that withholding your identity can be considered a criminal offense, right?" She locks eyes with him, composed, unwavering, but doesn't speak. Detective Jonah Briggs steps in next, employing everything from casual small talk to veiled warnings about possible federal indictments and how cooperation might work in her favor. Every tactic meets the same impenetrable quiet. "We've got ourselves a real enigma," quips one deputy. "Maybe KGB sent her," someone else jokes, drawing laughter. But when she's alone, subtle shifts occur. She scans the interior methodically, memorizing camera coverage, detecting weak surveillance points, clocking how long each guard stays stationed. Through the barred window, she surveys the facility's layout, pinpointing exits, and noting security flaws like someone trained to escape. "No matches on her fingerprints," Briggs informs the sheriff. "Nothing in state or regional files." "Run it through the federal grid," suggests the sheriff. "Tried. Server's offline. Tech says we can try again in the morning." Later, a junior deputy hands her a cup of water. As she accepts it, the cuff of her jumpsuit slides back just slightly, revealing a fine, curved scar on her inner wrist, precisely the kind left by advanced rope training from airborne drops. "That's quite the scar," the deputy remarks. "Fell off a mountain once?" she says with a half-smile. The first words she's uttered since arriving. By late afternoon, the court-appointed lawyer shows up, looking overworked and clearly frustrated. "You're not making this easy," he mutters after an unproductive 20-minute meeting. Now they're throwing around terms like domestic terror. And that firearm of yours doesn't exist in any registry. As the morning hearing nears, Briggs observes something uncanny. Dressed in the standard issue jumpsuit, wrists cuffed, facing charges that could ruin a life, she holds herself not with rebellion or anxiety, but with a serene awareness, as if she's always been 3 steps ahead. As she's being led out to the transport van, her gaze flicks momentarily toward the bay, where a massive naval destroyer looms on the horizon. A nearly imperceptible shift plays across her features. The courthouse, built in 1893, still carries echoes of its past: carved wooden pews, creaky floors, and wrought iron fixtures. But today it's bursting at the seams with spectators, regional journalists, and a handful of men in dark suits strategically placed along the aisles. Presiding Judge Miranda Keegan looks unimpressed as she flips through the morning's file. At the defense table, the woman sits composed beside her clearly flustered lawyer. "Your Honor, I'm requesting a delay in proceedings," the attorney begins. "My client's lack of cooperation has made proper defense preparation impossible." A man in a dark blazer stands abruptly in the gallery. "Your Honor, Agent Daniels, Department of Homeland Security. We're filing for immediate federal custody due to preliminary evidence suggesting a threat to national interests." But before the judge can reply, another voice enters the fray. "The FBI is asserting authority on this case," says a new man in a dark suit as he steps forward confidently. "Your Honor, we believe this situation connects directly to a sensitive federal investigation already underway." Judge Keegan slams her gavel once, firm and loud. "This is still my courtroom, Agent. We'll handle the arraignment before entertaining jurisdictional debates." The court clerk begins the formal reading of charges: unlawful possession of unregistered military-grade firearms, refusal to comply with law enforcement, and possible ties to domestic threat activity. The defendant sits motionless, her gaze steady and fixed ahead, spine perfectly aligned as though molded from steel. In the front row, Detective Briggs studies her with a growing sense of dissonance. She didn't fit the profile of a threat, not a radical, not a disturbed loner, not even a typical felon. "How does the defendant plead?" the judge asks. The public defender opens his mouth, but before he can speak, the large oak doors swing open with a weighty creak. Heads turn as a Navy admiral in dress white strides down the aisle, his ribbons gleaming beneath the harsh court lighting. 2 sharply dressed officers follow closely, their presence radiating gravity. A hush falls instantly over the gallery. Without introduction or pause, the Admiral proceeds directly to the bench, veterans throughout the courtroom rising instinctively in a unified show of respect. Even Judge Keegan sits taller. The Admiral hands over a sealed folder to the bailiff, who passes it to the judge. As she opens and reads the documents inside, her expression evolves rapidly, from irritation to curiosity, and finally to solemn recognition. When she looks up, her voice is clear and deliberate. "Based on the material presented by the Department of Defense, all charges against the defendant are dropped immediately. This proceeding is now closed under grounds of national security." With a sharp bang of her gavel, the session ends. A wave of stunned whispers ripples through the room. The Admiral steps beside the defendant as the bailiff removes her restraints. Then, for the first time since her arrest, the woman speaks with measured calm and unshakable confidence. "Sir, I regret the disruption." The Admiral responds without hesitation. "Not at all, Commander. The Navy extends its apologies to you." At the word Commander, every military-trained individual in the room, including the bailiffs, audience members, and even Agent Daniels, snaps to attention, a spontaneous gesture of profound respect. Detective Briggs watches, dumbfounded, as the woman's entire demeanor subtly shifts. No longer blending into the background, she now exudes authority, standing with the unmistakable posture of someone long versed in command. The careful anonymity she wore like armor falls away, revealing the steel beneath. Judge Keegan, once a JAG officer herself, gives a respectful nod to both the Admiral and the now unmasked operative. "Thank you for your understanding, Your Honor," the Admiral says. "Commander Stratton has been serving under restricted directives. This incident required extreme operational discretion." Outside, under the crisp morning sun, reporters swarm the courthouse steps. The commander, now dressed in a Navy-issued gray sweater and civilian slacks, stands beside the Admiral near a government SUV. Sheriff Connolly approaches, visibly torn between pride and confusion. "Admiral, with all due respect, we've spent 36 hours treating this as a national threat. Some clarity would help." The Admiral offers a calm reply. "Sheriff, I understand. Commander Stratton is one of our most distinguished covert operatives. I can't elaborate on her mission specifics, but I assure you, she was never a danger to your people." Quite the opposite. Detective Briggs steps forward. Commander, I misjudged you. I'm sorry. She meets his eyes directly, her voice now entirely open. You have nothing to apologize for, Detective. You were doing your duty. An elderly man wearing a Vietnam veteran's cap steps forward from the crowd. Ma'am, he says, voice a bit shaky, I was Navy corpsman back in the Gulf. Sat through the entire hearing. I knew by your posture, something about it told me you weren't ordinary. He extends his hand with reverence. Thank you for your service, whatever it may be. She returns the handshake firmly. Thank you for yours. The Admiral checks his watch. Commander Stratton, it's time. Operation Winter Tides needs your debrief, and Joint Command is waiting for your report. Sheriff Connolly's eyes widen. Winter Tides? The op that stopped the explosives from reaching the East Bay terminal last spring? The Admiral doesn't confirm, only replying, Commander Stratton has served with distinction for over a decade. Most of her missions will remain undisclosed for national protection. A young reporter pushes through the crowd. Commander, any official statement? She looks calmly into the cameras and answers with finality. No comment, and I ask that you respect my privacy. As they made their way toward the waiting black SUV, an unexpected gesture unfolded. The officers standing nearby, some of whom had detained her just days earlier, subtly aligned into a corridor, standing tall and silent, while those with military backgrounds offered crisp salutes as she passed. Detective Briggs stood among them, a realization dawning at last. What had unsettled him from the start wasn't suspicion, it was the absence of ego. She hadn't been concealing guilt. She had been expertly trained to hide greatness. Meanwhile, miles away, dusk settled over the quiet shooting range on the rocky coast. Levi, the range supervisor, walked down the empty lanes for his final inspection before locking up. A sleek federal vehicle rolled to a stop and Commander Stratton stepped out. There was a marked difference in how she moved now, her posture relaxed but unmistakably precise, her every step economical, as though she no longer needed to dull her edge. I've come to collect my gear, she said simply. Levi gave a nod. Sheriff had it returned by special courier a few hours ago. He disappeared briefly into the office and returned with a locked metal case. As she unlocked and inspected the contents, he cleared his throat awkwardly. I did 21 years underwater, subs mostly. Not quite your field, I'm sure, but I could tell. There was something about you. She offered a faint smile. Most people only see what they expect to. He gestured toward the rifle. That piece, never seen one like it in regular rotation. You wouldn't have, she replied. Lifting it from the case, she assembled the weapon with effortless familiarity, then walked to the most distant shooting lane. Without attaching a scope, she aimed at a paper target, nearly lost in the shadows and fog of early evening. The shot whispered through the air. Levi raised his binoculars, blinked and muttered, "Dead center." She disassembled the weapon methodically, repacked it, and turned to leave. I appreciate your silence earlier. You could have stepped in. Didn't seem right, he said. But I made a call to an old Navy buddy up in Arlington. She paused mid-step and gave a solemn nod. That was the right call. As she reached her vehicle, he hesitated. You ever coming back? Her eyes drifted toward the distant bay where naval ships patrolled just out of civilian view. Some of us never really leave. You just stop seeing us. As the SUV disappeared down the road, Levi stood at attention and offered a perfect, silent salute to the red taillights. 2 weeks later, Detective Briggs was reviewing incident reports when his phone rang. Briggs speaking, he said. Detective, this is Admiral Reynolds. We met briefly during the matter involving Commander Stratton. Briggs straightened in his chair. Yes, sir. What can I do for you? I'm calling to extend an invitation. Tomorrow, Commander Stratton will be receiving commendation honors at Naval Station Chesapeake. She requested your presence. Taken aback, Briggs replied. I'd be honored, sir, but I'm surprised. I was the one who placed her under arrest. Sometimes those who challenge us the most leave us with the lessons we need most, the Admiral said simply. It's a closed event, but clearance can be arranged. The following morning, Briggs drove through layers of security before being guided to a small, secure auditorium. Fewer than 60 people filled the seats, mostly high-ranking military, many in civilian clothes but with the unmistakable posture of warriors. Briggs sat quietly near the rear. There were no news crews, no photographers. Admiral Reynolds took the podium without ceremony. Ladies and gentlemen, we are gathered to recognize Commander Alexandra Stratton for exceptional bravery and leadership during Operation Winter Tides. Details remain restricted, but I can share this. Over nearly a year embedded in deep cover, Commander Stratton single-handedly identified and neutralized a series of coordinated threats that targeted national infrastructure. Briggs watched as the commander approached the stage in full dress uniform, her ribbons catching the soft light. Gone was the silent woman in a shooting booth. In her place stood a decorated and unshakably composed elite operator. After graduating top of her class at Coronado, Commander Stratton became one of the first women to qualify for assignments under Naval Special Warfare Development Protocols, details of which remain off the record, the Admiral continued. During Operation Winter Tides, she eliminated 18 verified threats while embedded within hostile networks. Her actions directly prevented simultaneous attacks across multiple port cities, events that, had they unfolded, would have cost countless lives. Briggs sat still, finally grasping the extraordinary scale of the person he once viewed as a nameless detainee. The Admiral turned toward her. Today we recognize not only her courage but her restraint, her silence, and her willingness to carry burdens unseen. Commander Stratton, the nation owes you a debt it may never fully understand. When her identity risked exposure, she still upheld full operational secrecy, even though it meant facing arrest by local officers. Detective Briggs felt a twinge of discomfort as the commendation ceremony continued, but when he caught Commander Stratton's gaze, she offered a respectful nod, calm, without a trace of resentment. After the event concluded, he approached her with caution. "Commander Stratton, congratulations on the recognition." "Thank you for being here, Detective," she replied warmly, extending her hand. "I owe you another apology for everything that happened." She shook her head. "None needed. You responded exactly as you should have with the information you had. In fact, your persistence stood out. Most would have let things slide with a verbal warning about range policies." Briggs shifted uneasily. "If I may ask, why not just tell us privately who you were? Surely there was a way to avoid the arrest." She glanced subtly around the room, then guided him to a quieter corner. "The mission hadn't concluded yet. I couldn't break cover, not even for a moment. The individuals we were tracking had influence in small-town jurisdictions all along the coastline. If anyone suspected I had ties to military intelligence or received exceptions, nearly a year of embedded work would have been for nothing." "So, you let it all play out?" he asked. Her lips twitched into a barely-there smile. "Sometimes committing to the role completely is the only way to protect the objective, even if it's uncomfortable. Besides, I was confident the Admiral would intervene before anything escalated too far." Another officer approached, motioning that she was needed elsewhere. "It was truly good to see you, Detective," she said sincerely. "Stay sharp." As she walked off, Admiral Reynolds stepped beside Briggs. "Quite a remarkable operator, isn't she?" "Yes, sir," Briggs said. "Never met anyone like her." The Admiral gave a thoughtful nod. "You know, we're always in need of people who notice the right details and ask the right questions. If you're ever open to a new path, reach out to my office." Half a year later, Briggs stood aboard a Navy vessel, the shoreline of Massachusetts fading into the evening mist. After more than a dozen years with Coastal Haven PD, he had accepted a role with the Naval Criminal Investigative Service. His first assignment, liaison for interactions between elite naval operations and regional law enforcement agencies across the Atlantic corridor. As the ship moved steadily forward, his phone buzzed. A message from a blocked number read, "Some of us never really leave. Welcome aboard." A smile crossed his face. He instantly recognized those words from the range that started it all. He likely wouldn't see her again. People like Commander Stratton worked in permanent silence, their victories unknown, their losses never recorded. But now, he'd play his part in the infrastructure that shielded them. He'd make sure future cases like hers were handled with smarter systems, allowing both security and local cooperation to coexist. Just then, the ship's captain approached. "We've picked up odd activity reports from a civilian firing range near the next port. Thought you might want to lead the response." Briggs nodded without hesitation. "Absolutely, sir. I'll take the lead." As he read through the initial report, one sentence caught his eye and made him smirk. It described a woman of no particular distinction striking targets at extreme distances. Some things, it seemed, never changed. Months passed, and Briggs adapted fully to his NCIS post, shaping policy and building procedures to help field agents and police departments spot covert operatives before misunderstandings could unfold. His experience with Stratton became required study material in joint law enforcement seminars. Then, one rainy evening, as he worked alone under the hum of fluorescent lights, a quiet knock interrupted his thoughts. At the door stood a woman in modest clothes, her face calm, her posture understated. He recognized her instantly. "Detective," Commander Stratton said, giving a familiar, precise nod. "It's Agent now," he corrected, motioning her into the room. "Didn't expect to see you again." "Circumstances evolve," she said simply, taking a seat. I heard you've put together a new system for identifying embedded personnel after our little incident. Yeah, he nodded. It's already prevented a few missteps. She studied him for a second before continuing. That work hasn't gone unnoticed. It's why I'm here. We need someone with your perspective on an upcoming assignment. Wells leaned forward, curiosity piqued. What kind of assignment? The kind that demands someone fluent in both languages, civilian enforcement and military protocol. Someone who knows how to operate in the gray areas where those two overlap. Is this official? Very, she replied, sliding a file across his desk. Admiral Reynolds suggested you personally. As Wells flipped through the dossier, the magnitude of what she was proposing began to crystallize. An integrated task force designed to intercept domestic threats with overseas ties, maneuvering in the shadows where military authority and civilian jurisdiction blur. Why me? He finally asked. Commander Stratton gave him a familiar look, the one he'd first seen at the range, steady and unreadable. Because you followed the rules, even when your instincts told you something was off. That kind of discipline is rare, and it's exactly what we need. He sat with the idea, realizing just how far he'd come. Not long ago, he'd been a local detective in a quiet seaside town. Now he was being invited to operate in a space where few ever tread. When do we begin? He asked. We already have, she said, rising to her feet. Meet me at 0600, same range as before. And Wells? Yeah? Leave the cuffs at home this time. As she left, he looked at the folder again, stamped boldly across the front. Silent Tides 2. Tomorrow, a new chapter would begin. One where the lines between enemy and civilian blurred, where a successful mission meant no headlines, and where victory would go unnoticed by design. At the range, an hour before sunrise, Frank went about his usual early morning checks, something he'd done daily for more than a decade. He stopped abruptly when he saw the building's lights already on. Hello? He called out, his hand hovering near the revolver tucked behind the counter. Just me, Frank, came the reply. Commander Stratton sat behind his desk, scanning what looked like satellite imagery. Didn't think I'd see you again so soon, he said, relaxing. What's it been? 8 months? 9, she corrected. And I'm not here for the coffee. Frank nodded, catching on. Agent Wells called last night. Said I should expect company. He learns fast, she said. We'll need exclusive use of the facility for the next 72 hours. Frank raised an eyebrow. Big ask, peak hunting season. Which is why this came along with the request, she said, sliding an envelope across the table. He peeked inside. The check was generous, enough to cover half a year's worth of operations. That'll do. But you know I'd have said yes anyway. We do things the right way, she replied. Even when no one's watching, especially then. By midday, the quiet range had transformed. Nondescript SUVs pulled in one by one, followed by a communications vehicle posing as a cable repair truck. A dozen operatives arrived, each blending effortlessly into the background, none drawing attention. The walls were soon covered with tactical maps, Frank's modest office filled with encrypted radios and coordination charts, and the firing lanes became makeshift staging zones. Wells showed up last, unloading equipment marked for NCIS. Frank, he said, shaking his hand, appreciate the support. Hard to say no when Uncle Sam comes knocking, Frank replied. Besides, the commander has a way of convincing you without saying much. That she does? Wells smiled. Commander Stratton gathered the team. For those not yet briefed, intelligence indicates a coordinated threat is organizing within 80 kilometers of this site. Something big. We have a 48-hour window. These, she said, motioning to the maps, are the 3 likeliest locations, 2 residential sectors and 1 commercial zone. Civilian populations mean we can't afford mistakes. So we can't go in guns blazing, Wells added. Exactly, which is why you're here. We need someone who can manage the interface between operational teams and civilian jurisdictions without raising alarms. Over the next day, the team moved with surgical precision, conducting surveillance, intercepting electronic chatter, and observing without detection. Wells handled communications with local law enforcement, crafting believable cover stories and preparing contingency plans in case things went sideways. Frank watched from the sidelines, quietly impressed. These weren't ordinary soldiers or cops. They moved like they shared a language of unspoken cues, communicating with subtle nods and clean efficiency. Then, late that night, a breakthrough came. One of the surveillance teams monitoring digital chatter intercepts a string of encrypted messages originating from one of their flagged locations, an old shipping warehouse on the waterfront, officially registered under a shell corporation with no verifiable activity. Confirmed movement, one analyst reports. Thermal scan indicates at least 9 individuals inside, plus what looks like a weapons stockpile. Commander Stratton studies the data with sharp focus. Wells, she says evenly, this is where it crosses the line. We've got enough for probable cause, but jurisdiction needs to shift. This becomes a civilian law enforcement matter now. Wells nods and reaches for his encrypted phone. I'll coordinate with the Regional Tactical Response Unit. They'll need a situation brief. Keep it vague, she warns. Just foreign-trained individuals prepping an internal strike. Leave our task force and mission protocols out of it. As Wells liaises with the local command, Stratton quietly pulls Frank aside. We'll need one more favor from you. Name it, Frank replies without hesitation. Once this wraps up, some things need to stay off the record. The gear used here, the faces you've seen, what we were really doing. Frank offers a faint grin. Commander, I spent 2 decades in the Navy sitting on top of classified secrets. I didn't even tell my wife about half of them. You're safe with me. She studies him for a beat, then nods in approval. That's exactly why we came here first. You're dependable. The operation begins before sunrise. Under a veil of gray fog, local SWAT and federal agents breach the compound with precision, while Stratton's unit provides elevated overwatch, ready to intervene if the situation spirals. It doesn't. The takedown is swift and quiet. 9 suspects detained, dozens of illegal firearms confiscated, and digital files seized that will fuel ongoing investigations for months. The official version released to the media speaks of a successful collaboration between federal and regional agencies, sparked by anonymous intelligence. By early afternoon, Stratton's operatives have packed up completely, leaving behind no trace, no insignia, no gear, no presence. Frank, as always, restores the range to its standard state, replacing spent targets and resetting equipment. Wells finds him resetting lane 3. Thanks, he says simply. For what? Frank replies, smirking. Far as the papers know, I wasn't even here. Exactly, Wells says, smiling back. As the final convoy pulls out, Stratton circles back to Frank. This place has a knack for attracting unusual events, she remarks. It's just a patch of ground where people sharpen their skills, Frank replies. Some skills just happen to be more advanced. She hands him a card. No name, just a secure number. If you ever spot someone with extraordinary ability, call that line, quietly. Recruiting? He asks. Always, she answers. Finding the right people is hard. Spotting them before anyone else is harder. He nods. The talented ones tend to hide in plain sight. Exactly, she says. Take care, Frank. As she turns, he calls after her. Commander, was any of it real? The arrest? The courtroom? All of it? Or was that just part of the show? She stops, meets his eyes. What do you think? Frank considers a moment. I think the best camouflage is a distraction. Give people a dramatic story so they stop looking beneath the surface. For the first time, Stratton gives him a genuine, unguarded smile. You'd have made a hell of an asset, Frank. He chuckles. I'm fine staying right here. Someone's got to keep the doors open for people like you when you need a place to stay sharp. 6 months later, Frank is cleaning the lanes when a young woman, early 20s, calm posture, sets up in the far bay. She isn't flashy, doesn't show off, but the way she moves speaks volumes. Her form, the adjustments she makes for wind drift without checking any device, the way she logs each shot by hand, all tell a deeper story. He watches quietly for nearly an hour. When she finally lowers her weapon, he walks over. That's some precision work, he says. She offers a polite nod. Thank you. I try to stay in practice. Military background? He asks casually. College rifle team, she answers smoothly. It's a perfect reply, believable, difficult to verify. Frank plays along. Well, you're always welcome here. We get all kinds. As she packs her rifle, her movements echo those he's seen before. Calculated, efficient, no wasted motion. That night, after locking up, Frank sits at his desk and pulls out the plain white card Stratton gave him. He stares at the number for a long moment, then places it gently back in the drawer. Some stories never make the headlines, but some people always know where to look. The young woman had done an impressive job staying under the radar, but to Frank's seasoned eye, certain traits couldn't be masked. Subtle things, the posture, the calculated stillness, the way she scanned her surroundings, told a story louder than her quiet demeanor. He picked up the secure line and dialed the number from the plain white card. "Identification," came a flat professional voice. "Blue water, still horizon," Frank replied, recalling the passphrase Wells had taught him months ago. "Go ahead," the voice prompted. "Met someone worth your attention today," Frank said calmly. "Young woman, early 20s, highly refined marksmanship, subtle cues of advanced training. Claims she's part of a collegiate shooting team, but her body language and control suggest something deeper." A brief pause followed. "Assessment? Either she's part of your team running a field trial, or she's someone you should be watching." "Noted. We'll investigate. Anything further?" Frank paused, choosing his next words with care. "Is Commander Stratton still working in this sector?" The silence that followed stretched just long enough to deliver an answer of its own. "That name does not appear in any current deployment files," the voice replied evenly. "Your contribution is valued." 3 days later, the young woman returned, this time accompanied by a man who moved with a quiet authority that immediately caught Frank's attention. They trained side by side, the way they interacted hinting at a mentor-student relationship. After their final round, the man approached while the woman packed their gear. "Mr. Sullivan," he said, using Frank's surname, though Frank hadn't introduced himself. "I understand you made a call recently." Frank kept his composure. "I did." "Good observation," the man said. "She's under evaluation. Part of her assessment was to operate here without being flagged." "She's talented," Frank admitted. "But patterns always show if you know what to watch for." The man nodded. "That's exactly why observers like you are so valuable. Raw ability often recognizes itself better than our formal systems do." The young woman joined them, tone shifting as she dropped the act. "So, how'd I do?" "Mr. Sullivan spotted you within the first hour," her evaluator replied. "You'll need to refine how you hide your movement habits." She took the feedback in stride. "What gave me away?" "Adjusting for crosswind without checking tools," Frank answered. "Only one other person I've seen do that, Stratton." At the mention of the commander, both operatives exchanged a quiet glance. "Thank you for the feedback," she said sincerely. "Would it be all right if I came back to train?" "Of course," Frank said. "But if you're still trying to stay unnoticed, you might consider missing a few shots on purpose." As they prepared to leave, the man handed Frank a sealed envelope. Inside was a card, this one with a raised insignia he recognized from Naval Special Warfare, and a new contact number. "We're always scouting for low-profile training spaces and discreet observers," the man explained. "If you're open to something more structured." Frank weighed the offer. After 15 years running the range, maybe the next phase wasn't about retirement. It was about contribution. "I might be," he said. "Stratton spoke highly of your intuition," the man added. "That carries weight where we come from." As they pulled away, Frank remained at the edge of the range, watching the gravel settle in their wake. What had started as a quiet post-service life had unexpectedly evolved into a vital role within a hidden framework, one that identified and cultivated the people who kept the country safe from behind the curtain. He slid the new card into his wallet, tucked neatly beside the first. Some served in uniform where everyone could see, others served where no one looked. And then there are people like him, quiet sentinels who simply observe, making sure the shadows remain safe harbors for the work that must be done unseen. The following morning, Frank arrived at the range to find a box waiting by the office door. Inside was a precision-grade spotting scope equipped with advanced thermal optics and a discreet, encrypted comms device. No sender listed, just a folded slip of paper with 3 handwritten words. "Keep watching." Frank knew the handwriting instantly. Stratton. She was likely somewhere new now, deep into another name, another uniform, another impossible mission. But her presence lingered here, in the pine-sheltered corners of this range in coastal Maine, where people who seemed ordinary came to sharpen extraordinary talents beyond the reach of public notice. Frank set up the new gear, not needing to ask why. He wasn't just a range manager anymore. This place had become a checkpoint on an invisible map, a station for those who served from the shadows. And when another fresh-faced visitor arrived, too skilled for their cover story, too perfect in their mechanics, he would recognize it immediately. Because once you've learned how to see them, you realize they're always nearby. You just don't notice them until you know where to look.